Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I thought I would bring you a little item that I came across this evening. I was doing a couple of bits, making a couple of phone calls, speaking to my girlfriend, chat with my sister, bits and bobs. And then I noticed, of course, that our mainstream information bringers are up to their old tricks again. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it's bullshit detection time. And we have found yet another example of those little bits of BS that we tend to slip up on a daily basis. Some of us less and less because we've got a bit of an eye for it now, and we understand that it's lies because we have the research to back that up with. But nevertheless, 95% plus of the world's population do fall for this whole thing about us living on a globe spinning in space, and we send rockets out into an impossible region that we call outer space. So I'm going to just let this video or this news item play for a minute or so, and then every now and then I'll press pause and bunk in. I doubt it would take very long. So here it goes. I just feel a little bit cynical, and to be honest with you, a little bit pissed off, if I'm totally honest with you, because whilst we can jest about it a little bit and get all a bit sarky and maybe satirical around it all, these are blatant lies that are being served up. You're talking to 6:30, 7 o'clock news, main news, 6 o'clock news, whatever. Kids are sitting in the living rooms, whatever. Some families do eat dinner together. Some families do have the radio on in the background. And these are the sorts of headlines that are being pushed, right? So if you add all that together, you've got a nice little cocktail of absolute nonsense being handed to people on a daily basis. Floods of this stuff. Anyway, here goes.
America's first successful moon landing for more than 50 years has been hailed as a giant leap forward for mankind.
They never went in the first place. You can't have a gas pressure system like we have on Earth that creates pressure so that we can live without there being containment to separate us from whatever there is out there. Whatever the lights in the sky find themselves in, because that's what they are, lights in the sky, whatever they are, wherever they are, there has to be some sort of containment between us and whatever's outside, because you cannot have pressure. That's the measure of something pushing up against the walls of a container. The value that you read, that's your pressure, your PSI in this case. You cannot have pressure. You cannot have gas pressure without containment. So if you're sending rockets out from a gas pressure system into a no pressure system, an ever expanding vacuum of space, that is an impossibility because the gas would follow the rockets, right? So if you have gas next to a vacuum, you have to have a barrier in between. As soon as you release the barrier ever so slightly, entropy happens and the gas fills the available space. We'd be dead immediately. So any rocket launch that's supposed to be going out anywhere is a lie right from the get-go. Cannot be. Impossible. You cannot do it. We won't talk about all the other stuff that can't happen when you're in a BS region called space. I'm not even going to entertain space because it can't even exist in the first instance. Right? Anyway, let's continue.
By NASA. The Odysseus spacecraft is the first ever commercial lander to touch down on the moon's surface.
Wrong again. Because it's never going to do so. Because you can't leave this realm that we live in. We have to be contained, because if we weren't, we'd be brown bread. Namely, very dead.
It will assess the lunar environment ahead of a planned crewed mission there in 2 years' time. Sejal Karia has more.
So they're planning on sending crews up in 2 years' time to an impossible region called outer space that cannot exist next to a gas pressure system like we have here on Earth. Just wanted to remind you of that one. So 50 odd years later, and they're talking about costs and stuff like that. Of course, it's all nonsense. It's all distraction. It's all keeping people kind of, in that paradigm of, well, yeah, that's the norm. Of course, we've been to space. Of course we have. In fact, not only have we been to space, we're setting up shops and sports venues and all sorts on Mars. Can't validate it. No one's ever been there. Never seen a video clip of anything going out into space. Have you ever seen anything going out into space? Or have you only ever looked at cameras that point back down to Earth as the rocket's going up? Have you noticed that? And then after a certain point, it switches into CGI mode and you never see anything of any video stuff going on outer space. Everybody sat in these centres behind their monitors. None of them see video footage of anything floating around in space. They're looking at numbers and figures. They're analysing the data and translating it into what then gets served up to us in the form of CGIs and such like. I'll continue.
What we can confirm, without a doubt, is our equipment is on the surface of the moon. And
Liar. Total and utter liar. There is nothing on the surface of anything. My house keys are more likely to be on Pluto than any of these WASICs here being anywhere near that thing in the sky that they call a moon, a solid object that we know nothing about, but happens to be the same size as the sun. And yet they have to come up with some mad mathematics to make it then all fit. Because no one goes with their observations. They listen to what these morons say. But they're liars. They're all high-ranking Masons. Every single astronaut is a Mason, or certainly the ones that have been looked up and checked up on. No more than 600 people have ever been to so-called space, ever, since 1969. Back in the days when you could pick up a phone from the White House, as Nixon did. Nixon never lied, did he? And phone the astronauts on the moon and ask them how it's going. I think it was before they had a round of golf. And I think it was before they drove around on a gazillion dollars worth of beach buggy that I could have made from a Meccano set. Let's continue.
we are transmitting.
It was a muted celebration for an historic moon landing.
Wrong again. And transmission. Transmitting what? Transmitting what from where? It's supposed to be a total ever-expanding vacuum of space. There's no medium, there's nothing. Nothing would travel anywhere. Ever. Just wouldn't happen. Let's continue.
After taking a tense few minutes to confirm, the first ever commercial spacecraft had touched down.
I know this was a nail biter, but we are on the surface. Welcome to the moon.
Finally sparking cheers and marking the first time in more than 50 years the US's return to the lunar surface.
I'm glad they put simulation from NASA at the bottom of that picture because I'd never have guessed. You know. But the problem is they don't always do that. But it's absolute lies. It's total lies. People have to start understanding the basics of the realm in which we live, right? A lot of stuff was skipped over when we went to school. Just like where my daughter is right now. She just turned 14. Right? This is important that kids understand that this is bullshit. It's absolute lies. We're being lied to on a huge scale. But it's been served up via your radio-friendly and TV-friendly people, your familiar nice faces who everybody loves, your Lorraines in the morning, and your one shows and all this nonsense that gets watched, and your Love Island and all that bull. As you can notice, I'm in a bit of a no-nonsense mood, but it does wind me up. And then all you hear is people, well, it is what it is, isn't it? Or, you know, that's just the way it is. No, it freaking well isn't just the way it is. People can change things. They can. Without tearing governments down and stuff. It's not what anyone's talking about here. We're talking about perceptions. We're talking about identifying the lies and noticing the illusion, the deceit, which, by the way, is what the word NASA means in Hebrew. Right? Not just the devil's tongue, the serpent's tongue that you can see in the NASA emblem, also known as the two-sided triangle or the open vector that Allied tanks have marked on their tanks, for example, while the Russians have the number 33 because it's the 33rd letter of their Cyrillic alphabet, which has a certain meaning, of course, for those who know. On their tanks, we have the open-sided vector, the two-sided triangle on the Allied tanks marked. And that is exactly what it is. It's to tell you exactly what belongs to what, you know. But anyway, I'm going right off on a tangent there. But you'll see all the space agencies have exactly the same markings in their badges, whether it's the Indian one, the Japanese one, the European Space Agency, or NASA, or whatever. They're all the same. They're all one and the same. They all answer to the same people, which is the military, right? The military has got control of all of this. Of course, the military itself is also owned, right? Tavistock, for example, practically runs NATO. But that's another story, going well off on a tangent. So these guys here, like NASA, the ones that we're watching simulations for, were the ones where we're getting served up adverts where they tell us that bed mattresses, the top bed mattresses, have been tested by NASA, go out and buy them. Well, these guys, NASA, they are superseded by the military, who are themselves superseded by Tavistock, who are themselves superseded by the Club of 300, or I think it's called the Club of 300 or something like that, something about the 300 anyway. It's a good book out that was worth reading. I've forgotten the name of the title now. And so on and so on. It's secret societies as far as the eye can see. NASA, a small fry, believe it or not. But this is what goes on. So all your space agencies, they're all in it together. Because that's what creates the illusion. Countries, nations, states, nationalities, it's all nonsense. It's all been created for us, for the purposes of separation and for the purposes of divide, for the purposes of keeping information from another. That's why we're in the important times now. I think we're really on a clock now, because now that technology's got so far that we can get information to each other, albeit with lots of obstacles thrown in our way, there's a bit of a race on. It's a total and utter information war. People didn't have this 50 years ago. You know, who was looking at the photo of Armstrong stood on a bloody ladder, a black and white grainy photo on the front of a paper? Who was ever long distance phone calling their cousins in America and saying, oh, that looked fake? The technology wasn't around. People couldn't do that. They couldn't inform each other and compare notes. You can now, but we're on a clock. Meanwhile, these planks here keep propagating this nonsense on an evening, daily basis, both on radio and, of course, on your news, on every single different channel. Anyway, I was going to play it a bit further. In fact, let's do it. Let's just finish off this little thing here.
This feat is a giant leap forward for all of humanity.
Liftoff goes the Odysseus lunar lander.
Odysseus's epic journey began last week. A journey fraught with jeopardy, particularly the perilous descent to the moon's south pole with its many craters, cliffs and boulders. And while unmanned, its successful landing opens up a new chapter in lunar exploration.
Unmanned, hey? Makes it even easier to fake. You don't have to have people slipping up in front of the microphone. You don't have to have people being chased by fake reporters, getting asked to hold their hands on Bibles and all that sort of stuff, right? Yeah, it's getting to the point of slapstick. Why? Because they can. And it's as simple as that. That's what we're dealing with. Because they can. And I'm just mentioning it just to make people aware. I know a lot of you are, but people like my daughter are not. And she does watch my videos, and so they have an educational value on that level. It's important to keep an eye out for this. Just because a newscaster in the BBC or the pendant to the BBC in another country, in Germany it would be ZDF, for example, right? Just because they say something doesn't make it fact. So, or your school teacher, just because they say something or whatever, doesn't make it fact. Okay. Anyway, on that note, I will see you all soon. Some of you much, much sooner. I've got to scoot off. I've got something in the oven. I've got quite an appetite and I'm feeling much, much better. I'm getting much better now. So, yeah, I thought it was time for one of these little nuggets. Okay. Until then, thank you all for watching. Ta-ta for now.